Hi guys, it's Paula and I hope you are doing well. This is going to be a finale for Pan That Palette 2024 and an introduction for Pan That Palette 2025. I cannot believe it. I think I only got like 4, maybe this is the 5th update in the entire year. Normally I get 12 in, 1 for every month. It's been a weird year. Hopefully 2025 will be a little bit more structured. I'm making no promises, however. Throughout this year, I have been speaking about 3 different palettes in these updates: a baby Pan That palette, my actual Pan That palette, and my Better Together Pan That palette. We will go into all of them in this update. The reason you are seeing this video pop up before my empties video is because whenever I have something significant changing in this project that I need to talk about in my empties, I like to do this video first so that I don't have any spoilers in my empties video. So that will be the next video coming up. I already filmed it, and then as I was filming it, I was like, crap, I gotta film my Pan That palette video first. So that's what you're seeing today, obviously, and then the next video that posts up, hopefully tomorrow, will be my empties for September, October, November, and December. 4 months. Oh my gosh. All right, so back to this update. Let's start with Baby Pan That palette. Baby Pan That palette is a project I started back in 2017, inspired by another project panner who is no longer currently posting on Instagram. But I originally saw her use the hashtag Baby Pan That palette, and I thought it was so cute. And I was like, I need to do a Baby Pan That palette. So she just was working on a quad, I think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure she was just working on a quad in her Baby Pan That palette. I decided that for me, the rules for Baby Pan That palette is a palette with 5 pans or less. To be honest, I'm probably never going to choose a palette with 5 pans as a Baby Pan That palette. That, for me, is a Pan That palette, but that was the original rule I set for Baby Pan That palette. And the only other rule for that project is that I need to work on that palette until it's completely finished. The end date of that project is when I finish the palette, and then I pick something new to roll in. It's a forever project. I have previously finished 2 other palettes. I finished a quad that I think was from Estee Lauder. It was pretty well used by the time I brought it in. It was a declutter product from my friend Jamie. And then after that, I brought in a Lancome duo, which I panned. And ever since I finished that Lancome duo at the very end of 2020, I have been working on this tiny little duo from Smashbox. Should a 2-pan palette take 3 years to finish? No, it should not. But did it? It did. Let me show you where I was at last month's update. And this is where I am now. She gone. She is finally finished. I finished her probably over a month ago, I would say. This has been an empty for a little while. Yeah, I'd say probably over a month it's been gone. Really good feeling. I really, really enjoyed this duo. Despite the fact that it took me forever to use this up, I really enjoyed these Smashbox shadows. One was a matte, one was a shimmer. Both of them were kind of medium toned or light to medium toned, sandy, kind of neutral shades. I finished off the matte first, but out of the 2 shadows, I would say I loved the shimmer a lot more than the matte, only because the tone of the matte wasn't great. The quality of the shadow was really good. It was just kind of a very neutral shadow. And when it comes to any makeup product, whether it's a lip product or an eyeshadow, I prefer something with a little bit more pink in it or a little bit more peach in it, something with a little bit more, I don't like straight neutral colors in general. This was a little bit too neutral. Obviously, I was able to make it work and pan it, but the real stunner of this little duo was the shimmery gold. It was just such a beautiful shadow, and it really popped throughout the entire time I was panning this. I panned it for years, and even before I made this a Baby Pan That palette, this was a Pan That palette, part of my Panning Solitaire project the year before that. So, I've been working on this for 4 years now, I guess, which is crazy. But yeah, even from beginning until end, every time I wore this shadow, if I was like in a bathroom and I like check my makeup, I always was impressed with how beautiful this looked on my eyes and how well it held up throughout the day. It was just a really, really nice shadow. That being said, I'm ecstatic to have this gone and out of my makeup collection because 4 years for 2 shadows is a very long time, and I have too many eyeshadows overall, and I'm sure as good of quality as these were, I have dupes for these shadows over and over and over within my collection, so goodbye. In previous years, when I finish one baby pan that palette and bring in a new one, I like to do a community vote on which palette I'm going to bring in. I usually narrow it down to like 3 and let you guys choose. It's a lot of fun. I like doing it. I know you guys like helping me choose. And whichever palette gets the most votes is the one I go with. I am pretty sure that if I was to put this up to a vote, this would have been the palette that you guys would have chosen for me to work on. But I just felt like I couldn't leave it up to chance this time because I really want to use this up. And so the palette that I ended up choosing to work on next, and I have been working on a little bit over the past month, is this Franken duo that I made years ago. This is an old CoverGirl compact single eyeshadow compact. I panned it a long time ago. I can't even remember what the shade was. Probably like I don't know. I don't remember what it was. But in here are 2 shadows that I created several years ago. Jessica, Amanda, and I got a request from a subscriber asking about how we pan black eyeshadows. And so the 3 of us each took a different approach to share with you guys some strategies on how to pan black eyeshadows. And my strategy was to make Franken shadows. And what I did was both the black base in both of these shadows is from the Urban Decay, I can't remember what the name of the palette is, Smoked? The zip up palette, like silver palette that has a zipper around it. I think it's called the Smoked palette. And so I took a huge chunk of black from that palette and I mixed Becca's Opal highlighter to make this shade, which is a pretty good dupe for Urban Decay's Smog. And for this one, I took a bluish highlighter from an ABH Moonchild palette. God, I literally cannot remember what these palettes are called, but another highlighter. So I mixed 2 highlighters in with each of these black shadows, and these are the shadows I got. Now, this is not comparable to a full-size shadow. These were just tiny amounts. I mean, it wasn't tiny. There's a substantial amount of product in each of these. I don't think either of these shadows equals one full shadow. I think it's probably half a shadow at best. So I'd like to think that I could actually get through this in less than 3 years. That's my main priority, is to use this up in less than 3 years. Now, using these up, there is a downside and an upside to me panning this little duo. The downside is that using these up will not add any points to my low buy. The black shadow, the Becca Opal highlighter, and the ABH shadow that I pulled from to make these 2 shadows will still be in existence once I pan this palette. So using these up will not add any points to my low buy. However, using these up will add 2 palettes to my pan in every palette count, which I'm very motivated by. So by using this dark purple up, I will automatically add a pan in every palette point for my ABH palette. I won't get any points for pan in every palette for using this one up alone, because the Becca Opal came from a little single, not from a palette. But if I use both these up, I will earn a point for hitting pan in the Urban Decay Smoked palette, in a black no less. So that is pretty awesome. So if I can use these 2 up, I will be able to add 2 palettes to pan in every palette, because right now with these 2 here, I don't feel like it's officially hitting pan, even though if I were to open up those 2 palettes, you would see a big chunk of pan in a shadow in each of those 2 palettes. So I hope that all makes sense. But yeah, long story short, finishing these up will not add points to my low buy, unfortunately, but they will add 2 pans to pan in every palette, which is something I'm very motivated to grow. I'm attempting to grow my pan percentage. So, and I mean, I would like to think that despite the fact that these are deeper, smokier shadows, that I think I can do it. I think I can get through it. I could be fooling myself. I fool myself pretty regularly, but I'm cautiously optimistic. I've worn this one like maybe twice in the past month, and this one I've probably worn like 5 or 6 times. Both of them I just kind of use as outer corner shadows, and then I usually put something lighter on the inside. They're both pretty wearable that way. They blend really well. This one is still very black. Even though it looks kind of purpley blue, it's still very, very black. This one is a much more wearable shade, but it is kind of a grungy, greeny gray shade. Very pretty, but more wearable out of the two. This one's very deep. I have to wear a lighter shade on my inner corner. Actually, I'm wearing it today. I have this shade on my outer third, and then I have the acoustic shade from my Heavy Metals palette from Urban Decay on my inner half, and then I have the pink shade from my My Little Pony and ColourPop palette in my crease. And then I have my Pan That palette from 2024 on my lower lash line. It's kind of how my eye looks have been this year. But anyways, this is going to be my new baby Pan That palette moving forward. I will give updates every month in my Pan That palette videos, and I will continue to work on this little duo until these two shades are completely gone. And I'm really looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to it. All right, let's jump to Better Together. Better Together is a project that I created, and the Pantastic Ladies Facebook group picked it up last year. I'm really excited to report that they have agreed to bring it back again in 2025. So I will be continuing this project along with a lot of other people. And it's really awesome to see how much excitement there is behind this project. I am more passionate about this project than I am about most other projects because I created this project and I have a lot of feels for it. And I think it's a good project, but you know, when I see a lot of other people responding to it positively, it makes me feel really good, and I'm really excited that you guys like this as well. So I have been working on an e.l.f. 100 pan palette. This is also a former Pan That palette. This e.l.f. 100 pan palette was my Pan That palette in 2022. Yeah, I took a whole bunch of notes earlier, so I'm looking over at my notes. This was my Pan That palette in 2022 for the Size Matters Pan That palette theme from the Pantastic Ladies. I did a lot of damage, but I just felt like I was not done working on it. In 2023, I rolled this palette into Beauty A to Z and worked on 10 shadows in Beauty A to Z that year. And then in 2024, I brought it back as my Better Together Pan That palette. The whole idea behind Better Together is it's a complementary palette. So it's a palette that goes with other palettes that or other eyeshadows that you're working on. It doesn't have to be your main Pan That palette. It doesn't have to be the main palette you're working on, but in some way, shape, or form, it complements other eyeshadows that you're working on. With 100 pans, I don't see how I can't find something to complement what I'm working on in this palette. So I think that was kind of my justification, but this has just been a surprisingly satisfying palette to pan. This was a gift with purchase. This has literally zero value to me as far as money I've invested in it. I placed a fairly large e.l.f. order and they sent it to me for free. So I paid $0 for this palette. I had it for years and years and years and it wasn't touched. And now that I've started panning it, like I can't quit it. Part of the reason is that these pans are pretty shallow and there isn't a ton of product in each pan, and it is unbelievably satisfying to see progress so quickly. As a slow project panner, I don't often see progress. I have to put in a long time to see even a little bit of progress. So with this palette, I have the gratification of seeing progress much faster, and I really enjoy that. I also like a lot of these shadows. I don't like all of them. I don't know if I'll ever pan this entire palette, but there are a lot of surprisingly wonderful shadows in this palette, and I still feel like I'm still scratching the surface on all of them. Let me go ahead and show you a picture of where I was at the last update with my e.l.f. 100 pan palette. And this is where I am now. This is kind of a shocking thing to say, but I didn't finish any eyeshadows from this palette in 2024. I finished eyeshadows in this palette in 2022. I finished eyeshadows in this palette in 2023. I finished 0 shadows in this palette in 2024. I'm very surprised because I've reached for this palette almost every single day. But that being said, I did not manage to finish anything off. I have made a lot of progress on some of these shadows, and I'm very close to finishing off 3. So I'm confident that in 2025, I will be able to finish at least 3 shadows off, if not more. This will be my Better Together Pan That palette for 2025. I'm not going to bury the lead. I'm going to keep working on this in 2025 as my Better Together Pan That palette. I'm still not ready to put it away, and I cannot explain, because typically my view has always been, after 12 months of working on a palette exclusively, like, I deserve a break from you, and you deserve a break from me, and we all deserve a break from working on anything for longer than 12 months. 12 months feels like a long enough commitment to work on things, but I don't know, something has changed in me over the last couple years, and I just want to keep going. So the shadow that I made the most progress on this year is this shadow right here. There's only a sliver of product around the edges. I've hit top pan, I've hit side pan, I still have shadow all along this side. And I guess I technically still have shadow all along this bottom side, but as you can see, I am very close to finishing that shadow. That is the shadow I've used as my brow bone highlight all year long. It doesn't take a lot of product to to use as a brow bone highlight. It just, boop, and then I'm done. However, I use this almost every day throughout the year, and it is very close to being done. I think probably before the end of January, it should be a goner. It's too bad I couldn't get it done this year, but that's okay. The next shadow I've made some really good progress on is this shade down here. I've always referred to this shade as my New Wave dupe. I had recently hit pan in the ABH Subculture New Wave eyeshadow, and then I started working on this, and I felt like they were very comparable on the eyes. They have a very similar look. I really like that shadow as an eyeshadow, especially in like my crease and transition area. And I've really enjoyed working on this shade. It is really beautiful. I got a little bit more to go on it, but I have also hit bottom pan. And yeah, I feel like I've made some good progress on it. And then the third shadow I am very close to finishing now, of course, is this pink shade right here. And I've hit top pan. That's it. There's pan everywhere else, but I hit side pan at the top. Again, I think if I used it every day for like a month, it would be a goner. This was in direct competition with the ColourPop Pink that I'm working on in the Panner's Pan. I felt like both of them kind of did the same job, and I didn't need to wear both. And so for the first part of the year, I tended to reach for this quite a bit. And then at some point I started feeling like you got to hit pan on that ColourPop shadow. So I started working on that more. And between the two, they kind of divided my attention, but I am very close to finishing that off. Finishing this off would not only add another pan in this palette, but it would give me another point towards my 50 pink before 50, and it would give me a point towards my low buy. So there's a lot of reasons for me to plow through these almost done shadows, but I didn't get it done by today, obviously. By the way, today is New Year's Eve. Today is December 30th. Well, it's technically December 31st, but it's like 1 in the morning, so I'm still calling it December 30th. But yeah, so 2024 is over. The time to pan is over. My window has basically closed. So there's no like, well, maybe I'll get it done this week. No, 2025 is like here. Other shadows that I made some progress on throughout this year are definitely this one right here. This is kind of what I'm talking about as far as browns go. It's a warmer brown. Compared to some of the other shadows like the matte that's in this was in that Smashbox Duo. This is like a sandy, warm brown. I find it to be so much more wearable than that other like more neutral matte. I really enjoy it. It's a beautiful crease color. I think I really expanded the pan on that shadow throughout the year. And then I probably expanded the pan on these two a little bit throughout the year. This is kind of a pinky red, and this is kind of a like corally red. Both of them are beautiful shadows. I really like to play with them. And then I think I probably expanded the pan on this shade right here. This shade is technically a shimmery shade, but I use it as a matte, and it works really well as like a one and done shadow, but it also works really well in my crease. So it's also super powdery, and it seems like it's one of those shadows that every time I dip my brush in it, I see progress in it, which is really satisfying. But other than that, I didn't really work on much else in this palette, and I cannot believe I didn't finish anything off. It's really shocking. If you would have told me in January of 2024 that I was going to work on this palette all year long and finish 0 shadows, I would have said no way. But that's what happened. Very close on a couple, and they should be gone soon, but I will keep chugging away because I am the little engine that could. All right, and let's finally move on to my Pan That palette. The theme for the Pantastic Ladies Pan That palette 2024 was fun sized, which was a small palette or a palette with small pans. I was ready for this challenge, or I thought I was ready for this challenge, because after doing Pan That palette now for many years, I think we are wrapping up year 7 of me doing Pan That palette and not having a lot of success with panning palettes, if we're being honest. I was ready for a gimme, or so I thought. So I chose a little Coastal Scents quad. It is a sampler quad. It is nothing. It is so tiny that I actually didn't even consider this a quad in my inventory for years and years and years. This has been in my eyeshadow singles inventory because I didn't think there was enough shadow in any of these pans to count as a full-size pan. Boy, was I wrong. This has been a huge challenge for me, and I'm a little speechless by where I ended up. But before I show you what my little fun-sized palette looks like, let me show you a picture of where I was at the last update. And this is where I am now. "12 months, babies. 12 months of usage, and this is where I am. I didn't see this coming, guys, and I think I even joked in January, like, if I don't get through this little quad, I am done with Pan That palette. I am revoking my panning card. Like, we're done. But 1, I didn't finish it. 2, I'm not done panning. And 3, I'm not revoking my card. I am going to continue doing what I'm doing because I have a lot of fun doing it, even though I sometimes suck at it. Yeah, so I did hit 2 pans since the last update, though. I did not have pan on this shade up here. I did not have pan on this shade down here at the last update. I've definitely expanded the pan here since the last update. This guy is still the redheaded stepchild of the quad, although I am wearing it as a brow bone highlight today, and I have been trying really hard to learn to love a matte white eyeshadow as a brow bone highlight. I am a 90s girl. I like a shimmery brow bone highlight that will never end, but I'm trying, for the sake of project panning, to get used to the idea of a matte white on my brow bone, and so I'm branching out a little bit. Throughout doing this project, I discovered that Coastal Scents isn't even around anymore. I didn't even realize that. You guys tell me so much. I have no idea what's going on. Like, head in the sand, blinders on, clueless. I was really impressed with these shadows, though, and I've had these shadows for a very long time. This little quad originally came in an Ipsy bag, and I have not been subscribed to Ipsy for a very, very, very long time. This is probably back from like 2014, 2015. This is old, and these shadows have performed beautifully. Despite the fact that I've pretty much reached for this quad every day over the past year. Not every day, but most days. I mean, I wish I could tell you how many days, but I really reached for this a ton. I will also say that I really never used this quad as a standalone eyeshadow look. I used it in combination with other eyeshadows, and I very rarely used it on my entire eyelid. What I did the most throughout this year was using this shade as a lower lash line eyeshadow and this shade as an inner corner highlight, which I thought I would absolutely get sick of during the year because I feel like it's a very specific look, and I feel like it's kind of an outdated look. Like the blue inner corner highlight kind of reminds me of 2019 more than 2024, but I've really loved it. And I have gotten a surprising amount of compliments from people who are not makeup enthusiasts who just like the way that it looked. They'd say, oh, I like the green eyeshadow. And I'd be like, oh, thank you. And a lot of times I hit something totally different on my top lash line, like I do today. Like none of these shadows are on my upper eyelid where I have the bulk of the color of my eyeshadows, but I wore this faithfully. I wore those two shadows faithfully as a lower lash line and inner corner highlight throughout the year. It didn't take a lot of product, but that's how I was able to make the progress that I did. This shadow I absolutely loved. It is a beautiful charcoaly green gray. I pretty much used it exclusively as either an outer half of my eyelid eyeshadow with something lighter on top of it on the inner half. And it was beautiful. It was a really beautiful shadow. I really enjoyed it. Out of these 4 shadows, all of them were very easy to use except for that one matte white. That was the only one I had trouble with. When this project first started, I didn't know how I was gonna award myself points for finishing these shadows, because again, I didn't even consider it to be like a full eyeshadow. But now that I've been working on this all year, when I do finish one of these shadows, I will absolutely be giving myself a point towards my low buy. It has been such hard work to finish off these shadows and make any progress. It has been a slow go. I'll do a quick montage of my updates. There aren't 12 updates. And so with a lot of these updates, it was probably like 2 or 3 months of usage in between. So maybe it'll be more satisfying to see the progress, but it won't be a typical montage from beginning to end, but I'll go ahead and show that now so you can see where this started. It was basically brand new. I did have to repress this white shade because it had shattered, but it hadn't been used at the start of the project. This was a brand new quad. Okay, let's talk about Pan That Palette 2025. This is a long video. All my videos are long videos these days, aren't they? All right, let's talk about Pan That Palette 2025. I cannot speak to what the Pantastic Ladies theme is yet. As many of you know, the Pantastic Ladies require a blood oath to ensure that we do not speak of the Pan That Palette theme prior to January 1st of that year. So I cannot speak to what the actual theme is going to be, but what I will say is that I feel like it is a very general theme. Some of the Pantastic Ladies themes are very general and it can cover a multitude of palettes within my collection, and other Pan That Palette themes are very specific and I have to zero in on a very small group of options that fit the criteria. This is one of those years where the theme is very general. I kind of feel like everything I currently own fits the criteria of the Pan That Palette theme. So I will be doing the Pan That Palette theme for 2025. However, I have decided that at this point in time, I'm not ready to give up this little quad. I'm too far in. And so this is going to be part of my Pan That Palette for 2025. I just got to keep going. I'm especially with the 3 shadows that I have pan on. Like I got to keep going. I'm not sick of the light blue inner corner. I'm not sick of the green lower lash line. It's a really easy quad to reach for, and I just would like to see this gone. Like I think what I'm really feeling this year more than in other years, like I said, in most other years at this time when I've been working on a palette for a year, I feel like I deserve a change. I've given that palette enough time and I'm ready to move on. And lately I've had a shift, and that's not how I feel anymore. Like at this point, I'm just kind of like, I've put in so much work and I've done a lot of the groundwork and I'm ready to like seal the deal and finally finish off these shadows that I've been working all year on and making some good progress. So I've also been kind of thinking about previous Pan That palettes of previous years, of yesteryears. So I decided to go through and make a list of every Pan That palette I've ever done, and just to kind of assess, like, where are we at now with the Pan That palettes of the past. So in 2017, which was my very first year of doing Pan That palette, I panned a face palette. It was the Too Faced Natural Face Palette. It only had 6 pans of product, and they were all face product. 4 of them were cream products and 2 of them were powder products. I finished all the cream products off years ago. That left me with 1 blush and 1 bronzer. The blush I'm actually currently working on in my Classic Project 10 pan, and the bronzer is still kicking around, but I depotted those 2 remaining pans from the palette and got rid of the palette several years ago. So they are now living in my magnetic palettes. It doesn't really feel like I still have that palette, but I do technically still have the tiniest amounts of blush left that I'm currently working on, and a bronzer that has pan. In 2018, I panned my Pure Go Nude palette. That palette is now gone. I completely panned that palette. Not in the year of 2018. It took me a couple more years to get through it, but I did stick with that palette and finish it off, which I'm very proud of. Next was a magnetic palette in 2019. That was a crazy year. I was also doing The Experiment that year, which really was fun. No, it wasn't. The Experiment was a project I did with Jessica and Amanda, and basically we were trying to see if these mathematical equations that were floating around the internet about how many years of product you owned. There was basically a calculator that you could use to determine how much year of makeup you owned by putting in, like, the information on the product. Like, if an eyeshadow said that it had, 3 grams of product, you put that in. You put that in for every product you own, and then you indicate how many days a week you wear eyeshadow and how many eyeshadows you typically put on your eyes when you do your eye makeup, and it would calculate how many years of eyeshadow you had. So the experiment was all about seeing if those mathematical equations were accurate for us and our painting style. Now, Amanda, Jessica, and I have very, very different panning styles. It turns out that for Amanda and Jessica, they actually use more makeup than the mathematical equation suggests. And for me, I use less. Way, way, way less. I don't know how that's possible. I feel like I put on makeup every day. I always look like I have makeup on. I don't go for a no makeup look. You can clearly see I'm wearing makeup, and yet despite that, it doesn't go anywhere. Like, I put it on day after day after day, and the makeup doesn't go anywhere. So that being said, following the rules of the experiment along with my Pan That palette was kind of crimping my style, and I felt that pain all year long. I did manage to finish off 3 pans from that palette that year, and I've since finished off 2 more pans. No, I managed to finish off 2 pans of product that year, and I've since managed to finish off 3 more pans from that original magnetic palette. So 5 of those pans, from what I can tell, are gone and used up and out of my collection now, but all the rest of the shadows from that magnetic palette are still remaining. The next year was Panning Solitaire. That was a project created by Erin, where I did a single, a duo, a trio, and a quad. The duo was my Smashbox duo that I finished in this update. Other than that duo that I've completely finished now, many years later, I also finished 1 additional shadow. But other than that, I didn't feel like I made a lot of great progress on that project that year. I felt like that year was kind of abysmal, but that was also COVID. So that was another crimp on my panning progress. I just felt like, working from home didn't really motivate me to wear makeup, and having to wear masks didn't really motivate me to wear makeup when we did return to work. It was just a tough year for makeup use up for me, and I think a lot of us, but 2020 was COVID, so that was a crazy year too. 2021, I panned the Viseart Petite Pro 2 palette. In that year, I finished 0 of the 8 tiny little pans that I was working on in that palette. I have since finished 1 shadow completely, so I still have 7 remaining shadows from that palette. Then we moved on to the e.l.f. 100 pan palette. You know where I'm at with that. I do have 9 finished pans out of the 100 now. And then the next year was Better Together and Kicking It Old School. And that was my Clinique quad and my Maybelline quad. Out of those 2 4-pan palettes, I've only finished 1 shadow. And then finally, I have this year where I worked on my Coastal Scents quad, and I'm not done with that. So, long story short, I want to keep working on this, and I want to try and finish this, or at least finish 3 out of the 4 shadows. But I've also decided, call me crazy, I've also decided to bring back my magnetic palette. Whew. This is going to be a challenge alongside the e.l.f. 100 pan palette and that tiny itty bitty quad. But let's face it, that itty bitty quad I'm only using mostly as a lower lash line eyeshadow. I still need to put something on my upper lids every day, and I think I could pull from a lot of these shadows right here. I also have a lot of eyeshadows in my Panner's Pan project, and that project will be winding down, I believe, in the next few months, depending on when Jessica finishes her Panner's Pan project. So all the shadows that I'm working on in that project will no longer be in any project. So I don't want to say I'm optimistic. I think I've finally gotten to the point in project panning where I've lost optimism. I've become more of a realist, but I think these are the shadows I'm drawn to working on the most. A lot of people were wondering if I was going to do like a plan to pan, plan my pan that palette video. Obviously it never happened, unfortunately, and I apologize. But the truth was, first of all, the year flew by so fast. I didn't have time to, I don't feel like I really thought about project panning. I wasn't really looking ahead for project panning. I was just trying to get through like the moment that I was in, working from day to day, focusing on what was in front of me, not really thinking about the future. And I think, again, that speaks to the fact that I wasn't as sick of my pan that palette as I might have been in previous years. Hey, toenails. You've got loud toenails, sis. Shh. But I also think that I just didn't really have any direction as far as where I wanted to go. And even now, on New Year's Eve, there's nothing in my collection that's like, oh, I'd love to dig into that palette, or, you know, that there's nothing that I like everything. There's nothing I'm just like pining over though. It's not that I don't like my current makeup collection, but there's nothing that I'm just like, oh, gasp, spoon, I would love to pan that. Like, I just want to get through some stuff that I've been working on for years and years and years. So I have decided to bring back this palette. It is not exactly the same. Like I said, I did finish 5 shadows or 5 pans from this palette. It's a little bit different. But what I did do was I took 3 pans from my Viseart Petite Pro 2 palette. So these 3 pans that have panned are from my Viseart Petite Pro 2 palette, and I stuck them in there. So this is the pan that I ended up finishing, and then those 3 pans came from right here. These are nice. These Viseart palettes are nice because there's a little spot where you could stick your finger, and you don't need any tools or anything. You could just pop them out, and they're magnets, and they come out super easy. So that's really nice about these. So rather than pulling in this little palette separately, I decided to add them into my original magnetic palette, which was my Pan That palette from 2019. A lot of these shadows are the same from that palette. This top row is very similar to what was in my original magnetic Pan That palette. A lot of these singles are from that palette. This one, this one, this one, this one, this one. This monstrosity over here is from that palette. Other shadows are new, and first of all, nothing is new in my collection. Everything is old, but a lot of these shadows are new to this magnetic palette compared to my Pan That palette 2019, and are shadows that I've really never worked on before. I really wish I could depot these Coastal Scents shadows and slip them into this palette, but I haven't been able to figure out how to do that. In fact, the reason I had to repress this white shade at the beginning of the year was because I was trying to depot those shadows, and that's how I broke that shadow. So unfortunately, I cannot add those singles into this. At least I don't think I can, but this is the current state of my little magnetic palette. Obviously this and this. Okay, let's just put it all out here in one handful. And this and this. Obviously this is a little bit too much eyeshadow for me. Obviously I will not be panning all of this in 2025. I've accepted that. I am okay with that. I just want to make as much progress as I can on these shadows that I've chosen. Is this a lot of shadows? Yes, it's a lot of shadows. Is it a drop in the bucket compared to all of the shadows I own overall? Yes, it is. It is a drop in the bucket. This is a very tiny sampler amount of all the eyeshadows I own. I would love to finish a couple of these pans off. I would love to continue making room in my magnetic palettes to have some, you know, movement, to be able to move some things around. My magnetic palette collection is tight. I have a lot of magnetic palettes and all of them are full. So it would be great to make some wiggle room in my magnetic palettes. I do have a couple of pans that are in this tiny palette that I've been working on all year long that are getting there. They're almost gone. So hopefully that'll create some wiggle room, but hopefully I can finish off a couple of eyeshadows. And hopefully I could get back to panning some eyeshadows in my e.l.f. 100 pan palette. I don't know if this is the most well thought out plan. I will admit that. I don't feel like this is the most well thought out plan, but I would like these shadows to be in my bathroom throughout 2025 and to see how much progress I can make on panning them. That's the plan. Wish me luck. Watch me change my mind in like 5 minutes. In like 5 minutes, I'm like, what was I thinking? Anyways, that's where we're going with right now. That's where my heart is leading me, and I have to follow my heart. So that is the plan for 2025. I hope you guys are excited for your Pan That palettes. I hope you guys are excited to watch a ton of Pan That palette introductions coming up in this next week or so. At next month's update, I will disclose fully what the name of the Pan That palette theme is and who created it. I have that information. I just don't feel like I can release it today. That's the plan for 2025, and it does fit the Pantastic Ladies Pan That palette theme. I will have the Pantastic Ladies Facebook group linked in my description box down below if you want to check them out. If you're not already following them, you could give them a follow and see what kind of projects they've been coming up with over there. It's a fun group of project panners that support each other. And yeah, I think that's it for this very long video. I've been talking forever. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. And I will see you in the next one. Bye.